Dear colleagues and friends, let us start a session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of thesis by Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna for the degree of Candidate of Psychology, specialty 190005, Social Psychology, on the theme Personal and Situational Determinants of Altruism. The Order of St. Petersburg University of the 26th of August 2020, number 7425/1, me, Aleksandrovna Svetlana Nikolaevna, Doctor of Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of Personality Psychology of St. Petersburg University, was appointed Chairman of this Dissertation Council. All the members of the Dissertation Council were appointed with the same order. Let me introduce them to you. Grishina Natalia Vladimirovna, Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Personality Psychology of St. Petersburg University. Gurieva Svetlana Zakhotovna, Doctor of Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of Social Psychology of St. Petersburg University. Miklaeva Anastasia Vladimirovna, Doctor of Psychology, Associate Professor of the Department of Human Psychology of Russian State Pedagogical University, named after Herzen. In the remote access mode, we have Kristi Koev, Doctor of Psychology, Tartu University, Estonia. Can you see? Can you hear us, Kristi? Please say yes if you can hear us. Is everything okay? Thank you. And you can see as well. The degree applicant is also present, Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna. Also, at the session, we have the academic advisor of the degree applicant, Sventsitsky Anatoly Leonidovich, Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology of St. Petersburg State University. And to improve the quality of communication, dear colleagues, working in the remote access mode, please switch off your microphones. But remember to switch them on when you're given the floor. Let me also inform you that our session is being recorded and broadcast online at St. Petersburg University website. The speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English. And if our colleague speaks in English, the speech should be translated into Russian. During the online broadcast, an email is currently displayed to which, during our session, all the listeners may express their opinions and send questions to the degree applicant online regarding her thesis and the ongoing scientific discussion of her speech. These questions shall be forwarded to me by our technical support department, and I shall read them during the discussion. Questions should be related strictly to the speech of the applicant and the content of her thesis. Please indicate your full name, position, and place of employment when asking a question. Questions that are not related to the scientific academic discussion of the thesis, the text, and assessment of the thesis shall not be presented. In accordance with the order awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, the degree of Candidate of Sciences and Doctor of Sciences approved by the local regulations of St. Petersburg University, hereinafter referred to as the order, a session of the Dissertation Council shall be considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved composition are present, but not less than 4 persons. Our Dissertation Council consists of 5 persons. All 5 are present, including 1 council member working in the remote access mode. Audio-visual contact has been established with all the council members. Thus, we have the quorum. Let me set forth the following procedure of today's session with the approximate duration of approximately 2 hours. Chairman's summary report on documents submitted by the degree applicant and their compliance with the applicable regulations. Answers to possible questions. 5 minutes. Degree applicant summary report outlining the key points of her research. Approximately 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant regarding her presentation. No more than 2 minutes per each question. So let's try to stick to that. Answers of the applicant, no more than 5 minutes. Speeches of all the members of the Dissertation Council in turn, with their assessment of the study, and the applicant's speech, with summary of their positions, questions and suggestions to the applicant. Approximately 10 minutes for each speaker. Speech of the chairman with her assessment of the thesis, approximately 10 minutes. Answers of the degree applicant to questions and remarks made by the council members, approximately 10 minutes. Open discussion, questions of anyone present with summary of their positions and or specific questions and suggestions to the degree applicant strictly on the theme of this study. No more than 2 minutes for each speaker. At that, all the speakers are kindly requested to register themselves in the registration sheet and introduce themselves before speaking. 9. Chairman, a presentation of questions to the degree applicants sent in the course of discussion of the presentation and a live broadcast at St. Petersburg University with answers of the degree applicant. Approximately 10 minutes again for each question. Speech of the academic advisor of the degree applicant, approximately 3 minutes. Discussion of the council members before the open individual voting of the results of the defense. For that period, the sound shall be switched off, approximately 5 minutes. Open individual voting. Chairman shall count the votes and the results shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Next, making decision on awarding or non-awarding the academic degree and closing remarks of the degree applicant. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to this procedure? If you have no questions, let us proceed. But first, I'd like to ask you to switch off your mobile phones. If they are still on, thank you for your understanding. Let us start our session. First, I would like to outline the documents submitted by the thesis by Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna for the degree of candidate of psychology, specialty 190005, social psychology, on the theme personal and situational determinants of altruism, was accepted for defense by the order of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University on the 26th of August 2020, number 7424/1. Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna wrote her thesis at St. Petersburg University under the guidance of Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology of St. Petersburg University, Svensitsky Anatoly Leonidovich. Number of publications of the degree applicant which set forth the main results of her research according to the enclosed list is 10. In peer-reviewed journals from the list approved by the Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation, 3 publications. In journals indexed in scientometric databases, Web of Science and Scopus, no publications. The degree applicant submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University a full set of documents for acceptance of her thesis for consideration and defense. All the documents comply with Article 12 of Section 3 of the Order. All the documents submitted by the applicant, according to the information I received from the curator, comply with the requirements and are kept in the applicant's attestation file, Copies are available from the officer of the Dissertation Council Activity Support Department, who is currently present. Before I give the floor to the degree applicant, do you, dear council members, have any general questions to the degree applicant, and is it necessary to read and review the entire list of documents submitted by the degree applicant? I see there are no questions. Then let us proceed, and let's give the floor to the degree applicant. Aleksandrovna, the floor is yours. Dear Svetlana Nikolaevna, respected members of the Dissertation Council, let me present to you the results of my thesis, Personal Situation and Determinants of Altruism, conducted under the supervision of Professor Anatoly Leonidovich Sventsitsky. The study of altruistic and pro-social behavior is one of the key tasks of social psychology. Responsiveness to the needs of the loved ones, interaction in small groups, volunteer and charitable activities have become important in the last decade and critical in conditions that require coordinated public action, such as the epidemic of coronavirus infection. Despite this, the issues of altruistic behavior have been only partly addressed in the Russian psychology, and mainly in terms of development of pro-social tendencies of the individual in the ontogenesis process and his moral development. However, the need to broaden the understanding of the determinants of altruism and the nature of their relationship. On this basis, we formulated the goal of our study to identify specific features of personal and situational determinants of altruism. The object of the study were Russian and foreign students aged 18 to 26, as well as residents of major Russian cities aged 18 to 50 years. Hypotheses were formulated for the study, and the tasks shown on this slide. In our work, we relied on the following theoretical and methodological grounds. The study of the altruistic orientation of the personality was conducted in the context of consideration of altruism as a strategy of interaction in a group aimed at striving for well-being of all its members and achieving the group goals formulated by Anatoly Leonidovich Sventsitsky and his co-authors. The motivation concept of emphatic care are considered in the context of David Batson's classic approach. Special attention is paid to the concept of SWOT's value orientations, as well as Albert Mehrabian's approach to consider the individual's aspiration to affiliate with a social group. The work has been performed within the framework of a situational approach, whose founders are Kurt Levin, Lee Ross, Richard Nisbet, Philip Zimbardo, and Natalia Vladimirovna Grishina, who is present here. The questions of social determinacy of actions and intentions through the action of group effects were considered from the perspective of classical approaches of social psychology of Daly, Robert Cialdini, and David Batson. We consider altruism to be a type of pro-social behavior which is both a behavioral and motivational category, reflecting a focus on the well-being of another person or a group of people, and willingness to perform such actions even at the cost of your own interests and resources. For consistent and comprehensive analysis of altruism and its determinants, we proposed and tested a four-component model. We considered the social perceptions of this phenomenon, assessed the altruistic orientation of the individual as a motivation and value component reflecting the measure of personal altruism. The next step was the study of its behavioral component, the willingness of the individual to help a person or group in need due to the impact of various personal and situational factors. And finally, another form of conceptualization of altruism was the willingness to participate in volunteering and charity, which are its socially significant manifestations. Thus, the four-component model of altruism allowed us to present a complete picture of the phenomenon, clarifying its significant elements. To solve these tasks, a set of methods was used, including both standardized and authors' methods, interviews, questionnaires, and socio-psychological experiments. The three-stage study involved 677 people. The study was conducted both face-to-face and online. In the first stage, the non-standardized interviews and questionnaires were conducted to reveal the peculiarities of the youth's everyday perception of altruism. On the second stage, a survey with elements of quasi-experiment was conducted to assess the readiness to assist in changing conditions, as well as to analyze the relationship between the altruistic orientation of the personality, value orientations, and the desire to affiliate with the group. At the third stage, a psychosociological experiment was conducted to assess readiness to participate in charity and volunteering under the influence of social effects. According to the work plan, during the first stage, interviews and questioning were conducted. The method of content analysis of responses was applied, and conclusions were drawn that social conceptions of altruism include selfless motives, ability to sacrifice personal interests, resources to help, maintain well-being, and save individuals or whole group in need. These findings formed the basis for the development of the study in its subsequent stages. In addition, a pilot comparative study was conducted among the students from Russia and the Netherlands, and preliminary results were obtained that most of the representatives of both groups commit altruistic acts, but significantly more students from the Netherlands identify themselves as altruistic and believe that waiting for the approval and reputational benefit from the act does not reduce its altruistic nature. At the second stage of the study, we applied an original method to assess readiness to perform altruistic acts. For this purpose, hypothetical scenarios of pro-social interaction were designed: volunteering in a nursing home, saving animals from flooding, and volunteer work in Africa. Each scenario included a series of conditions that gradually changed the picture that the subjects encountered in the care process. Two groups were formed, each of which evaluated respondents' willingness to help in scenarios that developed in the opposite directions, the most potent of pro-social actions or the most difficult circumstances. We found that the altruistic orientation of the personality is related to the willingness to help people in different contexts and the changing conditions, but not animals. In the scenario of volunteering at a nursing home, respondents with various degrees of orientation of personality showed significant differences in readiness to provide assistance in easy and difficult situations throughout the development of the proposed scenario. However, another result was obtained when analyzing scenario volunteering in Africa. The graph shows dynamics of readiness to help in respondents with high and low values of the altruistic investment scale. This data is given for two conditions: facilitation and complication of the situation. There's a significant difference between the willingness to help among people with different levels of personal altruism, but only in a positive rather than a negative situation. As a result of this stage, we concluded that there's a positive correlation between the altruistic orientation of the individual and readiness to help, which is affected by the situational factors. Altruists in situations with high risk, low need for help from recipients, and lack of compensation show a higher willingness to help than non-altruists. In situations where there's a threat to the safety of life of the helper, the altruistic orientation of the person does not affect the readiness to help. Further, a multiple regression analysis method was used to test the hypothesis that there is a relationship between value orientations and altruistic orientation of the personality. The value of kindness showed a significant result in the analysis of personality altruistic orientation predictors. The regression model was also included in the value of stimulation, the desire to search for sensations from the outside. In turn, the two value orientations, self and hedonism, showed the opposite result, and high values of these scales indicated lower indicators of altruistic orientation. When analyzing the significant predictors of altruistic orientation, we identified the values of goodness and conformity were included in the regression model with a positive effect. The value of hedonism showed a negative correlation and a negative effect. The correlation analysis method was used to test the hypothesis that there is a correlation between the altruistic orientation of the personality and the expression of the motives. The structure of the individual's desire for affiliation assumes evaluation of two scales: fear, rejection, and aspiration for acceptance. We found that the results of the altruistic investment scale demonstrate significant correlations with the results of the dash to accept, and the results of the altruistic mountain scale show significant correlations with the results of the fear rejection. When assessing the altruistic orientation of an individual according to the two methods, the scale of attitude We identified differences in value orientations and affiliation trends, which allowed us to differentiate two types of altruism, the first and the second level. Predictors of the altruistic orientation of the second level are value orientations related to kindness to others and the desire for stimulation from the outside world. The egoistically directed values of hedonism and independence associated with independence and self-direction demonstrated inverse relationships with the altruism of the second type. The value of conformity is a predictor of altruism of the first type, which indicates the desire of such a person to perform pro-social actions to prevent negative consequences. Thus, the altruism of the first level is characterized by conformal behavior based in compliance with the norm of reciprocity and regulated by the fear of rejection. Of the second level is based on the values of kindness and self-development, and is governed by the desire to accept the group and care for the common well-being. To assess the impact of group effects on readiness for charity and volunteering, a study was conducted using the experimental method and elements of the survey. Depending on the experimental condition, the subjects were given different descriptions of the situation in the charity sphere and the size of typical donations. The social proof effect condition included a description of charitable behavior shared by many residents in our city. In turn, the empathic care fact was expressed in the presentation of a situation where beneficiaries of charitable foundations were in greater need of help. The social proof group found the least willingness to provide assistance in the form of donations or volunteering. In experiment 2, the condition of social proof was modified, and the condition called the minority influence, information was given about the behavior shared by a small group of people. We found that significantly fewer people in the minority influence group were willing to donate large sums of money, while in the social proof group no such effect was observed. As a result of the experiments conducted, we concluded that the group effects have an impact on the readiness for charity and volunteering. Displays of the effect of social proof do not lead to an increase in readiness to provide assistance, and may lead to a significant decrease in the level of responsibility. The effect of empathic care has no effect on the readiness to help. A number of factors related to the readiness for charity were also identified. Thus, the altruism of the second type is associated with the readiness to make donations to charity even in conditions of anonymity. Past experience, personal perception of the importance of their own contribution, and the feeling of personal responsibility are important factors in readiness for charity. Thus, the purpose of my research was achieved, and new theoretical data were obtained, and practical recommendations were formulated, which, however, do not exhaust the whole range of manifestations of altruism in the life of individuals and have a strong impact on the nature of pro-social behavior. Still needs to be clarified, which may be the subject of further research. Thank you. Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. Do you have any questions at this point? No one has any questions. Anastasia Vladimirovna, please go ahead. Mariia Alexandrovna, thank you for your presentation. The three strategies or the three scenarios for your experimental study, taking care of animals. Why have you chosen exactly these three scenarios? Have you conducted any preliminary work? Yes, social interaction scenarios we used were different by the nature of recipients, help provided to humans or animals, geographical factor, Leningrad region or in Africa, and by degree of potential risk for the respondents who were put in these hypothetical situations, and possibility of compensation. Thus, each of these scenarios was a fairly complex situation. And as for the context, these ideas were obtained during the pilot study, the use of the help of interviews, where respondents evaluated various situations and assessed how this situation is a manifestation of altruism or heroic behavior or none, and the conditions were modeled considering the risk factors for the actor, potential compensation, and the need for assistance. These factors were obtained as significant factors through not only via a pilot study, but also with the help of literature analysis. In many significant works, these factors have been described as significant factors for making a decision. Thank you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, maybe Christy, maybe you have any questions? Svetlana Zahodovna, welcome. Mariia Alexandrovna, you described an interesting stage between Russian and Dutch population, and most of the Dutch respondents call themselves altruists. What's the portrait of Russian population, and what are the differences of the Russian sample and the Dutch sample? How similar and how different they are? Let me tell you from the start that this stage was only a first attempt, or a pilot attempt, to evaluate differences, because the size of the sample cannot be used to make any generalizations, but just indicate some interesting results that can guide our research in the future. As for the portrait of Russian students that we have obtained, both Russian students and Dutch students claimed they have conducted altruistic acts, but only Dutch students characterized themselves as altruists. Maybe here the criteria for considering oneself altruists were different, and the intensity of actions, as I understood, so these were mostly daily actions typical in daily lives of our students. In general, the results were expected, because the role of cultural and ethnic factors in the pro-social behavior certainly must have an influence. And on the other hand, the results are very interesting, and I'm going to use them in my future studies. Maybe Svetlana Zahodovna has another question. I also would like to recommend, because what is missing is the ranking of different types of altruism from the minimal contribution act, such as donating 5 rubles, to the greatest manifestations, for example, saving a drowning man, well-known manifestations. And in connection with this, such a ranking from the minimal to maximum manifestations will be very interesting. So maybe you can yes, I will continue working in this direction. So what is your question, Svetlana Zahodovna? That was not a question, that was a suggestion. Do we have more questions? Natalia Vladimirovna, welcome. I have a really small question. Today we may see how the scale of volunteering and charity is greating, which are the main manifestations of altruism. Now there's a new concept, this volunteer activity. I'd like to clarify how is different from, or are these concepts similar? As far as I know, these are identical, these activities are identical, similar, and in mass media. And I think in mass media, volunteer activities is like Russian term. Natalia, Vladimir, do you have more questions? Then Mariia Alexandrovna, I have 2 or maybe 3 questions depending on your answers. Please tell us, in your presentation, when you spoke about the theoretical foundations, the understanding of the classical concept of altruism, of networking strategy, can altruism be seen as a personal trait? Yes, I think so. Though, of course, in my study and judging by the works other researchers I have used in many cases, this pro-social behavior is a result of interaction of personality and the situation. If there are any personality traits which will, regardless of the situation, promote altruistic behavior, is still open to discussion. But I hope that altruism is an integral part of a personality. It can be studied and emphasized, fostered. Am I right in thinking that altruism as a characteristic of a personality behavior can be combined in different ways? An individual may demonstrate altruistic behavior without being an altruist by nature. Yes, here we should look at the motivation instruments. A person can be guided by other instruments, and the society and other individuals may benefit from his behavior, but should his behavior be classified as altruistic is a question of categorization, motivational basis, or how should the actions be judged, by motivation or according to their results. But on the basis of the theoretical foundations of our work, altruism without the altruistic intention is only a form of pro-social behavior where help has been provided and is considered pro-social. Your results as someone working on personality issues puzzled me, because you demonstrate the 2 types of altruism, but both types are connected with association, the fear of rejection, and the need for acceptance. Is there any internal motivation? So this puzzles me, how a human is capable of altruistic behavior regardless of the opinion of the others. This is a question I would like you to answer. Of course, when studying altruism of the 2 types, it's hard not to agree that there are other factors which contribute to altruistic decisions, not only the fear of rejection, not only social factors, but some internal personal mechanisms. But at this stage we have not explored those. We focus on the social aspects. That is why we managed to identify 2 types of altruism. Maybe many factors make significant contribution, and in the future we'll be able to. Then I have one more question. In one of the slides you showed that independence has a negative connection with altruism. How will you explain that? This on the negative impact of independence is predictable. It's described in the theory of Schwartz, because independence is a desire to be independent, to some degree can be considered hedonistic value, and regardless of interaction in a group, this altruism of first type or second type, it will be a negative predictor if aimed at oneself. Then maybe his interests and motivation will lie in a different space. So independent individuals are not altruistic. Let's go back to my slide. This applies to the second type of altruist. There was a different slide. Considering these results are true for the second type of altruism, with benefit of the group achieving common goals, for them maybe this predictor will be declared. As for the first type of altruism, which according to our results in social psychology is altruism between two people, providing assistance to not on global well-being of a group. So here independence was not included. Do you have more questions? Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. Now let us proceed to the next stage of our session, and I would like to give the floor to Grishina Natalia Vladimировna, Doctor of Psychology, and let her present her review. You may read the review or only focus on the key points, because all the reviews have been published at the university website. Dear colleagues, the work that we are discussing today has obvious relevance, and it evokes interest. The very phenomenon of altruism has not been sufficiently described in the psychological literature, and also because this movement is connected first of all with volunteering. Charity work is getting enormous scale today. Mariia Alexandrovna started her research in today's world we see how relevant this subject is. Of course, when working on this thesis, the author ran into a number of difficulties, connected first of all with the fact that this phenomenon is not sufficiently studied, and ambiguity of the very concept of altruism, which was demonstrated by the questions we just asked. At the same time, I would like to say that, in my opinion, Mariia Alexandrovna coped with the tasks she set herself successfully. The thesis, by its structure, components and materials, complies with all the requirements normally applied to candidates' thesis, and in my review I would like to focus on the points of the work which seemed especially interesting and valuable to me. What especially catches attention is the empirical part of the thesis. Of course, is very impressive. A great number of interviewed respondents, tasks set at each stage, and situational determinants fairly seldom become subjects of studies, though everybody agrees that human behavior is a result of interaction of personal and situational factor. In psychological studies, most researchers focus on the personality predeterminants, because it's hard to capture those situational influences. It's hard to identify those situational factors, and the author successfully creates a methodology appropriate to this task. So that's what I wanted to say about the empirical part. The set of instruments specially developed for this theme, I think, can be used in psychological studies, and the solutions have value in themselves. Also, I'd like to mention some theoretical findings connected with novelty of the thesis, connected with, for example, the author proposes a structural model of altruism, identifies various types of altruism described in the language of phenomenology, describes interactions between situational personal factors, various value foundations for various types of altruism. Results obtained by the author will have great practical value because they can be used to solve a task for volunteer selection, participants of volunteer activities, and for training various educational and training programs for volunteers, for better understanding of their own motivation, which is extremely important in the framework of altruistic activities, and obtaining a personal reward, as called by Rogers. Maybe, speaking of advantages, I would like to mention the style of the text, which seemed to me very attractive. On the one hand, it's clearly and logically written. On the other hand, it looks well justified. The author possesses the necessary tools which can be used to present the empirical data. So from the point of requirements, formal and informal requirements, we apply to candidates' thesis. I think the work of Mariia Alexandrovna fully complies. At the same time, for the sake of discussion, I'd like to draw your attention to some points that can be discussed. First of all, I'd like to go back to the definition of altruism. The author says one of the tasks of her research was elaborating the very concept of altruism, which is a good task, but in reality, from the text of the thesis, the concept of altruism that is used is quite standard, used in dictionaries. So here my question is, to what degree, what is the author's understanding of altruism? The second question is connected with different levels of altruism. The author uses the theory of levels. Why exactly levels? Does that mean that the first stage is like the first stage of development of altruistic orientation, and the second level is like the next stage of development? So what is the significance of levels? We are used to using this concept as some level of development. And by defining these two types, of course, it was obvious that questions will be asked here. What is altruism? If you are saying that altruism is the main criteria which you constantly emphasize, but the first level is characterized, according to you by following the norm of reciprocity and fear of rejection. How is that connected with unselfishness as behavior which, in absence of fair rejection, maybe will not occur at all? How can we talk about unselfishness of such type of behavior? And maybe among these small issues, I would draw attention to incorrect definition of the purpose of the study, because the purpose is the same as the subject. You made the purpose of your study too narrow, and maybe I got an answer, and of course I got this question if it was necessary to include this small sample of Dutch students in your study. The sample is so small you cannot make any general, so I got more questions. At the same time, as I said, these questions or considerations are only points for discussion. When you take up a subject which has not been sufficiently explored, you should be prepared to come across various opinions, and at the same time, because the candidate's thesis is a qualification work, of course, in that sense, your level of qualification is beyond any doubt. And in conclusion, I have to read the thesis by Mariia and Nedoshivina on the theme Personal Situational Determinants of Altruism corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order on the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1, on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the degree applicant Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna deserves awarding degree of Candidate of Psychology, specialty 190005, Social Psychology. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Thank you, Natalia Vladimirovna. Mariia Alexandrovna, how will you prefer to answer questions? Yes, I'd like to answer right now. Dear Natalia Vladimirovna, thank you very much. Let me answer all of your questions. It's hard to disagree with observation about the wording of the objective, because a more comprehensive wording would better reflect its content. Nevertheless, in our case, we prefer to formulate the key component of the study as its objective. As for the definition of altruism, of course, the essence of altruism and its component structure cannot be defined or changed as a result of the study of the ordinary ideas. At the pilot stage of the study, we encountered a variety of ideas about altruism and the types of its manifestation in every life. In this regard, the task was set to clarify the key characteristics of this phenomenon, which are relevant to the Russian population, and to adequately formulate subsequent research tasks, as well as to understand, in the situation, if the majority of respondents had stated with certainty there is no altruism and any prosocial behavior in everyday suggests personal benefit, perhaps the research would be quite different. Thus, in this case, exactly the working definition of the phenomenon, this stage, among other things, was necessary to formulate situations of pro-social interaction, which became the basis of altruistic scenarios methodology applied in the second stage of the study. In addition, the definition obtained from our analysis really correlate with literature, in particular with the definition of David Batson, the founder of the idea of pure altruism, and the concept of altruistic motivation, which is reflected in the discussion of the research results. However, a number of approaches also consider altruism from a different perspective. Its biological definition was actually equated with prosocial behavior in general. Probably the description of the pilot phase of the study did not reflect the objectives clearly enough, and I agree with this observation. As for the two types of altruism and terminology and the use of level, Indeed, expanding the picture of scientific ideas about different types of altruism is of great interest. Differentiation of the two types of altruism and the introduction has been Russian Foundation for Basic Research at the Department of Social Psychology of St. Petersburg University. Our team demonstrated that first level altruism is aimed at helping a particular person, while the second level, measured by the scale of altruistic investment, is conditioned by the care of the common good and prosperity of the community. In our thesis, the content of two types of altruism was greatly expanded and supplemented by value correlates and peculiarities of affiliation with a group, as well as proof of relationship with the readiness to participate in specific and new types of pro-social behavior, charity, and volunteer activities. The question of whether an altruist at the first level can reach the second level of development remains debatable, but is an actual research target for a longitudinal study. As for the question of first attributing first level altruism to altruism is debatable, but I have to fully agree with that the correlates identified do not correlate with the correlation of unselfishness, which is a cornerstone in a significant number of approaches to altruism. However, it's hard to assert with certainty that absence of censure, punishment, first-level altruists would refrain from engaging in behavior for the benefit of others, although this conclusion can be formulated with a certain degree of probability on the basis of our findings. And I absolutely agree with the observation of a relatively high level of generalization of results in assessing social perceptions of altruism between students from Russia and the Netherlands. The inclusion of a small sample of foreign students is rather an initial stage of a promising cross-cultural study, and the primary results indicate relevance of this task. Thank you very much. Natalia Vladimirovna, are you satisfied with the I would like to clarify something from your answer. I got the impression that levels and types, in your opinion, are the same. If we look at terminology of our work, yes, they are. The question of whether the altruism of the first level can reach the second level, my remark was about the word level, but I see that in your opinion it's the same as type. Natalia Vladimirovna, are you satisfied? Yes, thank you. Then let us give the floor, let us hear the next review. I'd like to give the floor to Gurieva Svetlana Zakhotovna, Doctor of Psychology, Head of Department of Social Psychology of St. Petersburg University. Dear Chairman, dear members of the Council, dear guests, let me introduce to you my review to the thesis by Mariia Aleksandrovna Nedoshivina, Personal and Situational Determinants of Altruism. First of all, I'd like to say that we are living in hard times, and an important element of our society, or a manifestation of kindness in various forms of altruism. And because of that, relevance of the study is beyond any doubt. It is highly relevant because of phenomena and events we are facing, and the different forms, different types of altruism are very important. And here I'd like to say that, give my opinion on the form of the work and focus on the most interesting components, the form, and give my comments, maybe clarification, that needs some clarification. So first of all, I'd like to say that the structure of the work seems complete and logical, well presented. The quality of the work, special attention I would pay to the methodological part, the stages, tasks, and to some degree this is an example of well-structured part, which also includes 3 stages, and 677 respondents also increase significance of the work of the study itself. Speaking of the methodology, as was mentioned by my colleagues already, a big achievement of the author is the author's methodology for study of various social factors that affect the decision to take part in charity, value orientation of SWOTs, etc. And among the advantages, I would also mention good visual presentation, accuracy, and good use of such visualization resources such as figures, which helped to put knowledge into a system. As for the work itself, of course, the most interesting part was most interesting different forms of altruism, different groups of interviewed respondents, and 3 situations, of course, are hypothetical. These were not real situations where you gave people reaction to save animals, to the possibility to save animals, to behavior in a nursing home and in Africa. And we discussed, I had many questions about the 3rd situation, how appropriate this situation was, saving the people in Africa, but maybe the material, and maybe here you had limited freedom. I also paid attention to the description, to explanation of different types or levels or forms. In my opinion, these were 2 forms of manifestation of altruism. Of course, they are not levels, but different forms. The first variant, you talk about people trying to support other people because of the fear of rejection and being rejected by the society. The second form is people for whom the value of kindness are among their basic values, part of their personality profile, and they act because of different effects. This is, I think, this is a very interesting finding that needs maybe further development. And here I would mention an interesting point which you have not explored enough, maybe you have not noticed. For example, you said that people declaring values such as kindness and helping others, but there is a gap between unreal situations, conditional situations, relative situations, and reality where declared values in real situations, and maybe people who do not declare kindness, make no declarations about kindness, they may help others more in real life. So maybe there is a matrix which you may create over the time on the basis of your theoretical and empirical results, and maybe in the future you will be able to promote and to deepen the scientific knowledge in this sphere, one of the most complex and ambiguous concepts of today's psychology, personal social determinants of altruism. In general, I have a very positive opinion about your work, your contribution, your careful approach, your desire to be consistent, and your desire to promote, to expand the limits of this study. I would like, with your permission, to focus on some points where I would like you to clarify. For example, I would like to clarify, Mariia Alexandrovna, do you agree that different representatives of different professions have different models of manifestation? For example, they are helping professions, doctors, nurses. Do you agree that there are professions where the level of altruism initially is much higher? And is that reflected somehow in your work? An additional question is about profession of your respondents is age. The age of your respondents, are they mature? What age categories? In at what age people are more willing to help this cooperation, and how is that connected with age? The time component, the willingness to help. And next, my question is, how can we extend this willingness to help, not only right now, but over longer time period? Maybe there are many questions, and the reason for these questions is that your work makes one think. It's significant. Your work is a challenge and calls for further study of altruism. Yet these comments and questions do not reduce the value of the study. The work deserves positive assessment, and the author conducted significant work that has been successfully solves her tasks, obtains scientific empirical data which are well described, well analyzed. And thus the thesis by Nedoshivina, Mariia Alexandrovna, on the theme personal situational determinants of altruism corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order the 1st of September 2016 6821/1 on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant, Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna, deserves awarding degree of Candidate of Psychology, Specialty 190005, Social Psychology. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. A review was written by me, Gureva Svetlana Zakotovna. Thank you, Svetlana Zakotovna. Thank you. Please answer. Dear Svetlana Zakotovna, thank you. First, let me answer your question about the hypothetical scenario of helping the African hospital and volunteering in an African hospital. Of course, this scenario was a hyper version of helping behavior, similar to heroic actions, and as we found in our study, the ability of personal altruism did not get to this situation, but this scenario was necessary to determine the limits of personal altruism. Speaking of similar to Natalia Vladimirovna's comments, of course, this subject needs further exploration, and hopefully we will continue our research in this sphere. Speaking about the gap between reality and hypothetical situations, and existing in real life, of course, it's hard to deny there's a certain gap between hypothetical situations and reality, but in our work we deliberately studied the readiness to help, and on the basis of many provisions, theory of planned behavior, the use of situational interview method that we use across social interaction, declared types of behavior are manifested in its further behavior, though of course that can be an interesting task, but at the later stages of our study we have demonstrated that respondents who were more willing to take part in charity in the past, they had some examples of altruistic behavior. Now your questions about manifestation and how it's connected with professional activity or age characteristics was not part of the current study. Nevertheless, the results indicate that older respondents were more willing to make charitable donations, for example, to Advita. However, this result was no longer observed when adjusting the level of respondents' income. Thus, older people simply had greater financial opportunity to donate to charity, especially those related to cancer care. An evaluation of the occupational differences seems to be even a more pressing task, but right now there's no strong evidence to suggest that the highest degree of altruistic focus would encourage the greatest involvement of medical staff or rescuers or in some other situations, as in some cases such work can be related with significant risks to life and health, which is consistent with our results. In addition, it appears that some too high altruistic motivation can act as a barrier to effective professional performance due to high emotional load and risk of burnout. So the question if rescuers and medical doctors and nurses are more altruistic than representatives of other population needs further study. And regarding the question of prolonged impact of social effect, research of social effects on philanthropy indicates a significant short-term impact. In particular, in Caprara and co-authors' study showed that subjects who showed willingness to make donation after experimental manipulation expressed as a question what behavior from your point would be morally correct in the next phase of the study actually donated to charity, but the interval between the stages was no more than an hour. At the moment it's hard to say with certainty what kind of experimental manipulation could have created a lasting effect on willingness to help, but the task of such an impact can be considered really urgent. In addition, according to Zimbardo's approach, regular reminding, even training of the need to help those in need will ultimately lead to maximizing the positive contribution of the individual. Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. Svetlana Zakhutovna, are you satisfied? I am quite satisfied, but during the discussion part I'd like to give my opinion, and now I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, next member, Miklaeva Anastasia Vladimirovna, Doctor of Psychology, Professor, the Department of Human Psychology of Russian State Pedagogical University. Svetlana Nikolaevna, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I am very grateful for the opportunity to read this thesis, and I'd like to say that when I first read the title of this thesis, first thing that impressed me is courage of the author, that phenomena that touches upon a personality. It has personal, not so much professional, but personal opinion. And of course, in addition to that, from the professional point, the study is effect of social desirability. which the author has to avoid. So obviously, that was a very courageous move to study this phenomenon. And here I would like to agree with what was already said by my colleagues. The author has done much work. The literature review includes most of the new valuable sources in foreign languages, first of all in English, and the author demonstrates that she has very good understanding the study of altruism, which is very impressive. So I certainly support the opinion of Natalia Vladimirovna. The experimental part is witty, and I think the word witty describes it very well. The methodology is very witty. It was very interesting to read. I really liked how the author uses in her third chapter, speaking about the results, the statistics, everything is accurate, everything is in place, everything is of high quality. Obviously, the author has good understanding, and judging by her results, as the most valuable thing to me is the conclusion about determinants of altruism of the first and second type. I'm okay with the term levels, and then I try to explain it as follows. It seemed to me that it is connected with the levels of structure in social psychology, and then indeed we get interpersonal, intergroup, and maybe intergroup, external group levels, which can be implemented in your future studies. But here I would like to proceed to some critical remarks, because why I started to think about concepts, why these are levels and not something else. Maybe what is missing is the theoretical explanation of your study. I saw, Mariia Alexandrovna, that you put in a separate slide, so maybe that was an attempt to generalize, and I'm very grateful for that. This helped me to understand what governed you, but yet my question already asked by my colleagues, Natalia Vladimirovna, how do you understand altruism? To me, still is a question, even though you tried to answer Natalia Vladimirovna's question. You tried to answer using the empirical explanation through social demand, social request, but I would like to get an answer from point of social psychology. In your work you have several attempts. You talk about categorization, the content of these phenomena. So I'd like you to define altruism in the terms of social psychology. How do you understand it? Next, I have some other questions connected, for example, with the four-component model of altruism that you have presented to us in the slide and in your thesis. My question is, when I see the phrase the four-component model or model of some phenomena, I start thinking that I expect to see something that not only demonstrates components, but some connection, also demonstrates connections. So how social connected with readiness, different types of altruistic behavior. Maybe I fail to understand something, but I have not seen these links. So could you please comment the idea? What are the connections between the components in your model? How the elements are connected? Also, I have one more question. These are questions. My third question is about sample, which you used for your study, and generalization of conclusions. I would like to say I agree with my colleagues. As I understand, in your study, most of your respondents were young adults, to 50 years old, and in 2/3 of cases they were women. And in some places of your thesis you are given differences such as gender differences, and to me it is not obvious by specific, so it is not clear to me how the conclusions you made on the basis of your thesis characterize personal determinants of altruism, or they characterize personal only are only true, can only be applied to adult females. So these are my questions. I also have some remarks which are, and at the same time with all the wittiness of experimental model, it's hard for me to agree that it is experimental. I would call it quasi-experimental, because the behavior in hypothetical situations is not the same as behavior we shall manifest in real life, display in real life. Also, here we are dealing not only with behavior, but with the concept, the idea how you will behave in the hypothetical situation. Also, in quasi-experimental model, in my opinion, you very well described the factors that may affect altruism that you call situational, but the behavior, as we have already discussed, is a function not only of the situation but of the personality. And when I asked you my question, why you selected such scenarios, to me, in your answer, I could not see your understanding of personal significance of the situation, how the people describe their actions. That's not to mention, I think this model is quasi-experimental. We know that today, due to the studies conducted by Intajid Duran and his colleagues, Francis, the studies of the 17, 18, 19, the decisions, the morality-loaded decisions, decisions made on the internet using internet instruments are very different from what we would do in real-life situations, not in the digital world. So this is my first comment with your definition of tools. My second comment is about a hypothesis. I think you don't have a general hypothesis. You have 6 hypotheses. Each one looks too particular about how these personal social determinants are related. And getting back to your experimental or quasi-experimental model, with all the though your description is very clear, there is not enough explanation of expert. You used 25 experts. What did they do and how you used their assistance? It would be good to see that in your work. And in addition, I also doubt that the data you obtained studying the Dutch students is appropriate for your work. This is only a decoration, but they do not complement your work. But all the comments I've just given, these are like comments for the future or points of growth, because the work makes a very good, very positive impression. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that the thesis by Mariia Aleksandrovna and Nedoshivina on the theme personal determinants of altruism corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order of the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1, on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant Nedoshivina Mariia Aleksandrovna deserves awarding the degree of candidate of psychology, specialty 190005, social psychology. Article 11 of the above mentioned order has not been violated. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anastasia Vladimirovna, Mariia Alexandrovna, please answer. Dear Anastasia Vladimirovna. Thank you very much. Let's start with the questions. First, I'd like to start with the definition of altruism, obtained as a result of theoretical analysis of literature and data of a study, which can be formulated as follows. Altruism is a type of pro-social behavior that is both a behavioral and motivational category reflecting focus on the well-being of another person or a group of people and willingness to take action to maintain their well-being even at the cost of their own interests and resources. Since altruistic behavior can be difficult to distinguish from other types of pro-social behavior only by its results, the key characteristics of altruistic behavior are its motivational attributes. In this context, the assessment of altruistic intentions and readiness to help serves as an indicator of this kind of motivation. The question of selflessness of an altruistic deed comes to the foreground. The reward of this or that kind may be present, but the key point is the fact that waiting for this reward has not caused the action. In the context of psychological research, the approach to assessing altruistic orientation as a measure of personal altruism is relevant, which allows to assess the individual's focus on the well-being and prosperity of the group. In this case, the empirical reference to altruism will be the individual's performance, without waiting for a reward for the performance of these activities. A question regarding the theoretical and methodological foundations, as shown in my slide, and speaking of the four-component model, which I'd like to add that the readiness to perform altruistic actions is connected altruistic orientation with some limitation of personal risk to health of where the personal features have no significant influence. From the Volves which orientates is personal altruism of the second level which also of significant interest. Indeed, the gender component is a certain limitation of the research, but when comparing responses of male and female respondents, the size of groups was sufficient to perform statistical calculations and obtain reliable results. In addition, no differences between men and women were found when assessing immediate readiness to assist in hypothetical situation or to participate in charity. Thus, despite some differences in the expression of first-level altruism and value orientations, there is no reason to believe that obtained patterns are applicable only to female respondents. Speaking of now let me proceed to your remarks. Indeed, the wording of the method of altruistic scenarios studied readiness to participate in pro-social behavior was not clear enough, and in reality we assessed the impact of social effects in one rather than an actual behavior. Nevertheless, in our opinion, this method can still be considered an experiment, or it's difficult to disagree with the argument that there is a difference between people's perceptions of likely behavior in certain circumstances and their actual behavior, but the results of the study, both in the theory of planned behavior and the situational interview method, which is widely used in particular in staff selection, indicate the effectiveness and significant reliability of assessing intentions and readiness to predict future behavior. Among other things, our study actually analyzed the relationship between the willingness to participate in charity and volunteering and the actual past experience in these areas. We obtained positive relationships. Of course, a number of factors can also have an impact on altruistic choices in a real situation, but in many works, the readiness and readiness to pay reflect as seen as independent variables in social dilemma. This can have a significant on the readiness to provide assistance of charitable foundation, and some of them can be heavily stigmatized. But the results of the study showed that there are no differences in willingness to provide assistance depending on specific of the foundation. In our study, we used online survey format, which theoretically may have an impact on the answers when studying sensitive topics. However, a number of researchers point to clearly positive aspects when using remote research methods with the use of computer technology, in addition to an obvious increase in coverage, an increase in the number of respondents' access to hard-to-reach samples. We may decrease social desirability without visual identification interaction. I can agree with the observation about the research hypothesis, but in hypothesis, my hypothesis did not reflect the idea of two different types of altruism. But when we planned these two, we had no idea about these two studies. That's why it's not included. The expert evaluation method we used implied ranking of each of the additional conditions. The scenarios themselves were designed on the basis of results of the literature overview and pilot interview, where I identified as main characteristics, which should be recognized that a more detailed description of the expert evaluation in the text of the work would be useful. And finally, the small sample of students from the Netherlands. Let me repeat, this was an initial stage of a cross-cultural study, promising. The initial results indicate relevance of this study. The size of the sample does not allow us to achieve the desired level of generalization of results in assessing the differences in social perceptions between students of Russia and the Netherlands. For this reason, the data obtained are not reflected in the further stages of the study and represent a direction for an independent research task. Thank you very much, Mariia Alexandrovna. I would like I'd like to say something during the discussion part. Let us proceed to the next. Let me give the floor to Kristi Koev, Doctor of Psychology at Tartu University, Estonia. Kristi, can you hear us? Is everything okay? Can you see? Can you hear us? Yes, then the floor is yours.
It is a pleasure and honor to review the PhD thesis of Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna. Dissertation provides a overwhelming insight into personality and situational characteristics associated with altruism in the context of specified 4 different manifestations of altruism model. This thesis addresses a highly relevant and vital area of social psychology research, integrating as a whole the current and historical classical research about altruistic behavior as a multiply determined phenomenon. And at the other side arises new areas in the nowadays social psychology as developed and tested 4-component model in altruism. The dissertation has a clear contribution and very interesting results, and it addresses an important issue. No major criticism regarding this overall high qualified work. I should like to move to some specific areas of the dissertation. Introduction to the main text of is proper, including the general theoretical and methodological foundation of the study, highlighting the importance of the issue and the relevance of the research topic. The general purpose and the specific objectives of the dissertation research have explained, and as well as the hypotheses of the research have presented. Verbally, the first hypothesis seemed to cover larger area than included in the content of the hypothesis, covering also the comparison of two groups of respondents. And the last 6 research objectives seems to cover more large area of the research, also volunteering. In the addressing the complex issue, utilizing the whole dissertation should be useful to bring more attention to the use of one of the key terms, helping homage, across the dissertation, because it seems that the most parts of the thesis terms pro-social behavior and helping behavior are used by author as synonyms, but also in parallel lines as general and specific terms. The thesis is inspired from both the theoretical and methodological point of view. Authors respect the ideas and knowledges with sufficient theoretical background. Used research methods are appropriate to the aim and hypothesis formulated in the thesis. In the second part of the thesis, the methodological, covering the development of the triangulation of data collection through multi-stage methodology and integrating of quantitative and qualitative research methods. The most important thing is that authors succeed in connecting of 8 previously adapted research methods and developed research methods as integrated whole for analysis of research material based on the large data set, showing the author's high level of research experience and impressive command of empirical methodology. Nevertheless, concerning the methodological part of the thesis, I would like to make one critical comment. Research procedures are respected without describing the ethics of research, paying attention to the more in-depth information about whole process of research. Also, I should like to ask 2 questions to answer during the academical discussions. At first, what role can play participants' gender and urbanization in studying the social representations of altruism, the conceptualizing of altruism? Secondly, what role can play participants' gender in studying the interrelationships between the altruistic personality orientation and willingness to participate in charity? The results of the dissertation research are well presented with appropriate statistical analysis, and their interpretation is at a high scientific level, demonstrating the solid understanding of the research field with one minor exception. Generalizations in the area of comparative study among Russian and Dutch university students tended to be too large, covering foreign respondents. And lastly, in spite of the above-mentioned very minor remarks for academical discussion. This PhD thesis is clearly the result of great deal of work and much effort has been devoted to deliver a high quality thesis, bringing new evidence and new scientific debates in multiply determined altruistic behavior in social psychology. And conclusion. The dissertation research personal and situational determinants of altruism by Mariia Nedoshilova presented for the degree of candidate of psychological science meets the qualification requirements of candidate dissertation on specialty social psychology. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Мария, пожалуйста, ответы на вопросы.
Please answer, Mrs. Professor Koev. Thank you. First, I'd like to answer your comments regarding the ethical aspect of the study. Of course, when studying such sensitive issues such as pro-social behavior, the ethical issues create certain challenges, but in our study have not included any cheating, so we have not cheated on our respondents. So from that point, we may say that that ethically it maybe had some impact on their emotional state, but did not include any aspects that could be harmful. And speaking of the now let me answer your questions about the impact of gender and urbanization. This is an interesting task. Can be the significant differences in this area, including traditional gender roles, but in our study we have not analyzed the differences in social perceptions. The role of urbanization, in turn, can be observed when assessing the scale of act and categorizing it, and numerous studies demonstrate that, in contrast to rural area, assistance is much rarer in cities. It has also been shown that density of population influences the assistance. So our task was not part of our study, but this can be a very interesting field for further research. Speaking of the gender role in willingness to participate in charity was not within the scope of our study, but results we obtained, we may assume that in situations where charity will be an important element of belonging to a group, a willingness among women to support will increase. Of course, this is only a hypothesis, but can be an interesting direction for future research. And now, speaking certain limitations, speaking of generalizations obtained when interviewing Russian and Dutch students, I totally agree with this remark. Professor Koev, are you satisfied with the answers by Mariia Alexandrovna? Yes, thank you for your answers. Thank you. Dear colleagues, now let me present my review, my task, because you have already given your opinion, and I cannot but mention relevance of the research theme. Reality of our life has shown us how pro-social behavior is in demand in the society, and when the situation changes and we are in the zone of uncertainty, how important it is for us to feel the support of the others and to administer such support. And the problem of altruism in this work can be seen in a wider social context. We know very well that the very issue of positive social functioning is an interdisciplinary issue that requires clarification. The positive social functioning is in the approaches that we see in this work. Usually the problem is solved with the help of psychological well-being of an individual, with a sense of happiness in the society, and in this case maybe taking care about the others will be a situation where we will feel ourselves functioning in a positive way. So here the work is relevant. I would like to support my colleagues by saying that we are dealing with a wide theoretical analysis of literature connected with the understanding of the issue of altruism. We may see the interdisciplinary description of the term, a detailed analysis of global factors, analysis of different approaches, and a systematic model of altruism. And here I'd like, out of 172 sources, 112 sources are in English. This demonstrates how well the author understands the problem and how willing the author is to explore the problem using various approaches of foreign researchers. And at that, you always have this feeling, I beg your pardon, but you see, my feelings are mixed. The attempt to consider altruism in a wide sense is accompanied by a very brief summary of the concept. So maybe the theoretical analysis lacks depth. On the other hand, we see in-depth exploration of some key concepts. Not every thesis has a glossary and such a well-written thesaurus of the main concepts used. And this we may see in this work. So this makes it easier to understand why the author has interpreted the data in one or another way. I was very glad to see that the author uses the altruistic personality concept. This gave me inspiration, and so finally I expected to understand what is altruistic personality, because the idea was to describe the connection between some personality features such as empathy and actions. But on the other hand, and I have to mention that in the work itself, the personality situational determinants. Situational determinants outweigh the personal determinants, and my question about altruistic personality and if altruism can be seen as a personality feature was most of all connected with that, because the personal determinants of altruism are not sufficiently described. The novelty of the work lies in the attempt to differentiate the types or forms of altruism, because on the one hand the value of this idea is beyond any doubt. Altruism is described as a global phenomenon, but altruistic actions of one individual are different from altruistic actions of another, and that is certainly a significant contribution to the development of social psychology. On the other hand, the level calls for certain hierarchy and subordination, and here I agree with my colleagues in questioning the term level. It appears important to me the use of the method of situational interview, because this method, which enabled, unlike the other interview methods, how the impact of situational factors are connected to making the pro-social decisions, and through the use of this method, the author discovered a phenomenological aspect which demonstrates fluctuations of this willingness. So altruism is not stable. It depends on the situation. In some situations, an individual demonstrates more altruism than in another. And here the empirical component, in my opinion, has great significance because the suggested scenarios can be used to diagnose the individual's readiness to selection of volunteers and professional training of students of helping professions as modeling situations where they can try some actions. So these points are important. Also, I'd like to mention some successes. These scenarios modeling complex situations, and the very idea to demonstrate that complexity may affect altruistic actions can define altruists and non-altruists, because for true altruists, complexity of a situation is irrelevant, and an attempt to define altruists maybe is not completely validated, but the use of such an approach can be used for developing programs of volunteer support, how to cope with emotional stress, how to cope with burnout. So maybe using this approach for stimulation of pro-social behavior, I think it can be used. Thus, of course, in my opinion, the work is a success. Despite its complexity, it has novelty, as any novel pioneer study. It brings about some questions and remarks. So first, the theoretical part is rather than deep exploration of the theme. So the position of the author is not clear. This question was asked by Natalia Vladimirovna, but I think it is a second question. All the hypotheses seem to be a search of relations between key parameters. So that here is not clear what the researcher's task is, and stated in the subject of the study. So one parameters connected with another that doesn't determine altruism. 3, the purpose of the pilot study is not clear. The Dutch population, the aim of the sample of 132, most of whom are girls, 85. These were girls mostly getting psychological training. So they have already dedicated themselves to a helping profession. Is it possible to extrapolate the ideas to all young people, stating that these are, here I'm quoting on page 108, that the ideas of Russian and Dutch students about altruism. So these are. So this statement seems too general. The Dutch sample is absolutely insignificant, and the aim of the pilot study was to compare the theoretical and real notions. Then why is there no comparison in the first chapter of the study? So the idea of the pilot study can be in comparing how it is, the difference between the scientific notion and the real notion, but such comparison is absent. And on page 105, on the results of the pilot survey, I'm quoting again, the results of the survey formulates the characteristic features of young people's perception of altruism, corresponding actions and motives leading to them. The following criteria were found. This conclusion was made on the basis of survey on 132 students, 2/3 of whom are girls, and how justified it is considering these are girls in the helping profession. The regression analysis serves as a readiness for altruistic action, yet the percentage of altruistic is 24%, and by the hedonism scale is even lower, 21%. Thus, practically 3/4 of results are explained by other determinants not revealed in the study. Is it possible, in this case, to speak about the personal determinants of altruism, or, taking into account data from comparative analysis, we are talking about differences in the behavior of altruists and non-altruists, but we don't know the reasons for these differences and we cannot explain them. Here, let me repeat myself that situational determinants are much better described in this work. And the fifth question, how can the author comment on data on page 97? This figure was figure 5. It shows that under the control condition, ready to help a charitable organization, 57% are ready. And with the addition of the condition, such as need for help, so somebody needs help more, in the share of those willing to help drops to 41%. And with social evidence, we end with 32%. Why these conditions potentially can they increase willingness to help, in fact reduce it? This seems very strange to me, so maybe I misunderstood it. So these questions, once again, are connected with complexity of the studied phenomenon and difficulty and the author used quasi-experimental study, which is hard to make focus. A conclusion, the thesis by Nedoshivina, Mariia, Alexandrovna on the theme personal and situational determinants of altruism correspond to the basic requirements set by the order on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna deserves being awarded the degree of Candidate of Psychology, Specialty 190005, Social Psychology. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Signed by me, Konstantina Svetlana Nikolaevna, Mariia Alexandrovna. So many of these questions you have already answered. Dear Svetlana Nikolaevna, thank you very much. Let me proceed to the question about literature overview. I agree that the form of literature overview is not in depth, and so you this leads to this uncertainty feeling, but I think I have already answered this, presented our understanding of this. As for hypothesis, I agree with the remark, and of course the concept of determinacy is not identical, and in turn can be stated that the method of social psychological experiment and regression analysis make it possible to judge. But of course some tasks have been indeed solved with the use of relationship analysis, which seems to have yielded significant results with some scientific novelty and practical significance. As for the pilot study, of course the task of the pilot study was to identify the key features of the common perception of altruism, which were used in later stages of the study. We obtained a definition which of course relates with the classic definition of David Batson, which is reflected in the discussion of the study. Also, here we prepared material for the second stage of the study. As for the sample of Dutch students, I absolutely agree with this comment. And finally, certain limitation connected with the number of females and students in a helping profession, of course, but in later stages. After the pilot stage of interviewing, we found no differences between men and women and their readiness to altruistic actions. The use of regression analysis, but we applied to assess contribution. Here, readiness for altruistic action was not considered. The percentage is relatively low, but these data reflect some regularities and agree with the existing theoretical justifications, and the results in our study demonstrate validity of, and allow us to define two types of is a complex and can be predictors. So this requires more detailed study. And finally, the question of the results of the third stage. The result demonstrates effectiveness, but in unusual seems that social subjects were much less inclined to provide assistance. This effect is confirmed in the literature and has several possible explanations. For example, the study of Sherman and Yu, they're using messages to attract attention when collecting charitable donations. The greatest material response was received precisely when using the shortest inviting text. In the control condition, in this case, was also measured willingness to help. In turn, when evaluating real actions in the conditions of a real experiment, the largest number of participants agreed to donate money under conditions that simulate the effect of social evidence. Apparently, in this case, there may be differences in the manifestations of the effect in spontaneous and thoughtful behavior. Another explanation in the condition of social proof can be manifestation of the effect of diffusion. Apparently, the condition where it was reported may have already in charitable could be interpreted by the test subjects, so assistance will be provided by somebody else. In addition, can be the communicating significant information. It's interesting that one of the potential explanations for the differences in planned and real behavior is not only in the plane of socio-psychological, but in the other spheres of psychology. For example, results described in the first text is connected with the peculiarity of the mechanism of making fast and slow decisions described by Daniel Kahneman. The system 1 is responsible for automatic decisions that do not require much consideration based on already formed personal experience. System 2 comes into action when conscious reflection is needed to make a meaningful decision. And it should be noted that respondents were relatively more willing to help than in the condition of social evidence, but less willing, but the differences were not statistically reliable. One possible explanation for this fact is the impact of another social effect that resonates with empathic care. A strong need for help from a charitable foundation on the one hand may increase the desire of the individual to contribute, but it may also reduce the willingness to help due to the fact that the task is too complex and multifaceted, and small donations cannot affect. Such reflections are the result of a situation analysis justified, and solving this problem may lie in the significance of own contribution and ability to achieve the desired results. Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. Your answer to the last question demonstrates that the material you have collected demonstrates ambiguity of the concept of altruism, and the results that you have obtained and interpretation is much more valuable what we actually saw in your thesis. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, are you satisfied with the answers? I think we proceed to discussion. Have we received any questions? No, we received no questions online. Then, dear colleagues, we may proceed to discussion. I know that some of you are willing to speak. Who would like to speak? Certainly, many interesting points were mentioned today, which are will guide the author in her future work, hopefully. I also agree that any attempt to study a term characterized by high social load touches upon many side components such as situational effects, and in general this is an interesting work which is characterized by opening many possibilities for future study. So the work is still in progress, and every question that was asked today, they were not just questions, but they demonstrated a scientific trend to study, to take a different look from different angle. I certainly support, but there are many points which of course it's easy to say. Now we know how we could be better, but in reality you have already done a lot. I would recommend you to continue your work, because this is only a first stage. It's one of the most complicated spheres where you have to be careful with the terms, where every person here has his own idea how situations should be interpreted, where there is no ranking of the very term altruism from maximal to minimal manifestation. But in general, I think you've worked very hard, and all the clarifications, so these are all the questions asked today. These are milestones of our journey, and I wish you a successful journey as a scientist. Thank you, Svetlana Zakhodovna, Natalia Vladimirovna. So I would like to say a couple of words. Dear colleagues, the social psychology, and I am a social psychologist myself, they are in a difficult situation because they are working with phenomena reflected in everyday consciousness. On the one hand, it seems to make our life easier, but in reality that's not really so. and talking about altruism, and I understand the steps you have taken. We find ourselves get under the influence of everyday concepts. Psychologists are part of the matrix we are studying, but the everyday concepts should not govern us, should not guide us. It would be better if we could deny the everyday concepts of selflessness, drop it, and take a deeper look at this phenomenon. In my speech, I use the term personal benefit. If we considered social altruistic behavior from the point of personal rewards or fear rejection or other mechanisms that govern such behavior, then maybe we could get closer to the understanding the nature of this phenomenon, which is in the field of social psychology since its beginning. That is why our doubts, our questions, and our remarks are only a part of the discussion. And let me wish you lots of success in your journey. Thank you, Natella Vladimirovna. And I will be very brief. Mariia Alexandrovna, I support your work, but at the same time, I'd like to draw your attention that every work has scientific novelty, every work has practical significance, which is obvious, but every work has theoretical significance. The theoretical significance is where we put our results in some sort of a system. So I wish you that at the next step, I wish you to conceptualize your results on a theoretical level, and so this, please think about it. Thank you very much. Professor Koev, maybe you would like to say something? Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear guests, maybe someone is willing to speak, because this is the time for the open discussion. The academic advisor will be given the floor later. I see our discussion was very fruitful, and because after your thesis you get more, you feel you have more questions than answers, and on the other one hand, the questions are connected with conceptualization and with ambiguity of your results, and which are different from our daily concepts. Thank you very much. Then, dear colleagues, let's finish our discussion. Let me give the floor to the academic advisor, dear Anatoly Leonidovich Sensitsky. Anatoly Leonidovich, please come over here. Professor of the Social Psychology Department. Please speak in the microphone. Anatoly Leonidovich, we are waiting for you. Dear friends, let me not use the microphone. You cannot hear in this. I remember many years ago, back in Soviet times, no microphones were used. This was a long time ago. But anyways, so we are being recorded, yes. Oh, I see. I can speak in Russian, right? you made me think. Well, all my students, all my doctoral students, I'm giving them I have numbered them all. So Mariia Alexandrovna is number 54 on this list. So I have the opportunity to compare my doctoral students, and using the sports terminology, of course, Mariia Alexandrovna is among the leaders. And if I think I was lucky as an academic advisor, because ideal qualities of an ideal student Mariia Alexandrovna has. What is important for a researcher, for a doctoral student as well, first, is being passionate about the theme, and second, in independence. If a doctoral student has these qualities, she does not bother her academic advisor. Some students come with lots of information and ask the academic advisor, like, what am I going to do? So I never heard this question asked by Mariia Alexandrovna. Mariia Alexandrovna always knew what she needs to do. So my job my interference was minimal. I learned myself. It was very interesting for me up to a certain time, maybe until the beginning of this century. I could not understand why no one is studying this problem in why nobody in social psychology is dealing with this. So novelty is something we should notice. When I started thinking why this problem has not been explored, I figured out I got this insight quite late in my life. The question is serious. Why altruism has not been combined with the ideology of Marxism and Leninism from the point of my student, when I was a student. This theme seems so obvious, but not we anymore, in Soviet Union, we have no single scientific work, no single book where the word altruism, there was a book by philosopher Petrov called Egoism, so that it was a good combination. But altruism, this subject, was completely new, and it's so good that Mariia Alexandrovna got the idea to study this. And by the way, let me take another minute of your time. Then I figured out, when I became wise in the beginning of the 20th century, why it does not combine with the Marxist and Leninist ideology. Maybe those of the senior generation remember that in USSR in 1980s and 1970s, and at the very top and at the bottom, a poem was popular by Stanislav Kunaev. Maybe you remember the poem. He said, "The good should come with fists. It should be rough to fight with those attacking it." Obviously, this approach, such a view on goodness, of course, does not combine with the official. So it's so good that Mariia Alexandrovna took this new path, is working on this new problem Thank you, dear colleagues, for all your remarks or for this discussion. I would like to add that any thesis, just like any work, is good, not only because it answers some questions, but because when answering some question, it sets new questions. Science is endless, and altruism, the subject of altruism, is limitless. I advise Mariia Alexandrovna to continue exploring this topic. Here, there's a possibility for a doctoral thesis, or maybe for a research lab. Why do people help each other? Is a simple question, but there is no simple answer to this question. Thank you. Thank you, Anatoly Leonidovich. I'm sorry for taking your time. There are so many things I would like to say. Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. It was interesting for me to work with you and to read. I enjoyed reading your thesis as well. Thank you, Anatoly Leonidovich. Dear colleagues, since our session, some participants are working in the remote access mode, I have to ask if council members or Professor Koev or anyone present, or maybe the degree applicant herself, do you have any unanswered questions or unclear points connected with working in the remote access mode? Is everything okay? Do you have any unanswered questions? I don't have any questions. Thank you, Christy. Now, dear colleagues, let us proceed to the next stage, to the voting. And before we vote, we have the opportunity to take a technical break to discuss the results. The sound shall be switched off. What do you think? Do we need such a break to discuss the results? No, we don't. No, we don't need such a break. Then let us proceed. And let us proceed to voting. Let me remind you that I will ask each council member has to give his or her opinion individually, openly. We can all see and hear each other. I'm sorry, I keep asking the same question again. Dear colleagues, I put the question of awarding to Mariia Alexandrovna the degree of Candidate of Psychology, Specialty 190005, Social Psychology, to the open individual voting. Let me remind you that a decision of the Dissertation Council on awarding the degree shall be considered positive if more than a half, but not less than 3 council members present voted for it, according to Article 23 of the order. Council member Grishina Natalia Vladimirovna, your opinion. I'm for awarding the degree to Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna. Thank you. Council member Gurieva Svetlana Zakhotovna, your opinion? I'm for awarding the degree. I support this work. And Mariia Alexandrovna. Council member Miklayeva Anastasia Vladimirovna, your opinion? I support awarding the degree to Mariia Alexandrovna. Councilman Christy Koev, your opinion? I am for. Thank you. And me, Chairman of the Kostromina, Svetlana Nikolaevna, I also support this work. Thus, dear colleagues and guests, let me inform you that out of 5 council members voting, 5 voted for, no one voted against, and no one abstained. A decision to award to Nedoshivina Mariia Alexandrovna the degree of Candidate of Psychological Sciences, Specialty 190005, Social Psychology, has been made. let's give the degree applicant a round of applause. Since our session is conducted with some members working in the remote access mode, once again I have to ask Christy if she has any questions regarding the procedure. Is everything all right? I don't have any questions, thank you. And finally, we can give the floor to our degree applicant, Mariia Alexandrovna. Welcome. Thank you, Svetlana Nikolaevna. I would like to thank, first of all, St. Petersburg University for the opportunity to conduct research, to study, and to defend my thesis at my alma mater. I'd like to thank the Department of Social Psychology, Head of Department Svetlana Zakhodovna Gurieva, and members of the Council for taking part in today's session. I would like to thank my academic advisor, Anatoly Svensitsky, for working together for many years in the scope on altruism, and hopefully our research, we will continue our cooperation in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mariia Alexandrovna. We congratulate you. Now we can give another round of applause. I declare our session finished. Please stop online broadcasting. Thank you very much.